participate in our webinar today about the 211 National Data Platform Minimum Viable Product. And I am so excited to have Andrew Benson with us today. He's going to be leading out on this webinar. I'm just going to do some quick introductions and overview, and then we'll turn the time over to Andrew. Andrew is a consultant right now with Expound Decision Systems. He's has a wealth of experience leading a 211 in the Toronto, Ontario area, and now he works with us as a consultant on this particular project. As I mentioned, we have players here from both 211s as well as United Ways that are supporting their local 211, and we're excited to showcase this minimum viable product that we're working on. A couple notes about this presentation. It is very similar, if not almost identical, to the same presentation that we shared in Atlanta at the 211 Leadership Summit. So for those of you who may have attended that presentation, you are in for a treat because you get to see it again. And for those of you who also have additional questions, we'll be answering those after the session. So please stay tuned and we'll open it up for questions via the chat, and I think we should also have a ability to verbally connect with people after the session. We're also recording this webinar for those of you who can't attend the whole thing or have to drop off early or for some reason or want to copy it afterwards. We will share it in a recording as well, so please feel free to reach out to me in that situation. Just one quick note, again, before I turn the time over to Andrew, is I am so excited about this project. I feel like we have been talking about it since I was in the 211 network, working in the West about 10 years ago. We talked about, oh, we got to share our databases, we got to share our information better, and technology back then was just kind of on the eve of being able to create some interoperability among databases. And so coming into the network again and working on this project with Andrew over the last year, so I'm so excited to see it blossom to where it's taking root and really forming into a fantastic product. So that's what we're going to see today. Another reason why I think we need it, not just because we've been talking about it, is I think it is critical for our sector. 211s bring so much value to our communities, not just for individuals and people that call us up on the telephone, but the resource repository that we all have is a critical pillar and value that we provide to our communities. And so it is critical that we are doing this, and I think we're maybe a little bit behind the game in getting it done, so we're excited to see this project moving forward as it is now. I'm especially appreciative of the organizations that have already participated in helping get us to this point with the minimum viable product, and Andrew will highlight those players coming up. But very appreciative of those, and then also appreciative of those players that have saw it in Atlanta and said, hey, we want to get involved, and sign some MOUs and some had some conversations already about how they can also be a player in the next phase of this platform development. Especially grateful to the United Ways who see the vision of saying, hey, this is good, we need to get behind it. And then also these United Ways that are asking questions saying, what does this mean for us? It is a critical piece in delivering resources and solutions to the communities that we serve, and so you'll see that play out as well. And again, it's a valuable pillar in the 211 service delivery. It's not just a phone call that we provide. We provide so much more than that. So that's what's going to play out here as we view it. And I'm appreciative of everybody who has joined us. Again, we'll take time for questions at the end of the presentation. It's also going to be recorded, and we'll turn the time over to Andrew at this point. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Andrew Benson. I'm the president of Expound Decision Systems, and I'll provide you with a little bit of my background and sort of how we got to this point in a second. Just a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is on mute. We will unmute the audience at the end of the presentation and demo. We're trying to leave about 20 to 25 minutes actually of this 1 hour webinar for questions and answers. And as Josh has already mentioned, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted by end of today with a link for you to access, or for those who are not able to attend to view this webinar. So again, good afternoon, and thank you for attending this afternoon. You should be looking at your screen, which is showing just the splash screen for the 2-in-1 National Data Platform product. If you have any issues or questions that cannot wait until we unmute, we encourage you to type into the chat window, and Josh will monitor that and prompt me for any technical issues that might occur. Okay, so what are we going to cover? As Josh mentioned, this is really a repeat of the presentation that was given in Atlanta at the 2-in-1 CEO conference in the end of May or start of June. So our intention really is to provide to those people who weren't able to attend essentially that presentation. We'll provide a little bit of context on sort of how we got here on the platform, and then we're going to spend most of the time walking through a demo so you get a sense of where we're at today. So just to recap, here's what we're going to do over the next 20, 30 minutes. I'm going to set the context, how we got here, some of the platform goals. Then we're going to briefly talk about the architecture. So these are the capabilities or the components, if you will, of the platform, just so you get a sense of where this is going to land over the next year or so. As you will see, we have just a small piece of the platform built already with the support of several 2-in-1s, but there's a much bigger vision here at play. So we'll try and describe that in terms of the conceptual architecture. Then I'm very pleased to provide you with a demo of essentially a national website. Now, this is a very sort of skinny website in the sense that we've provided just enough functionality to give you a sense of how this would hang together from a user's perspective, and that's a website. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes with the product, but just to help you kind of bring this to life for you, we have built a minimum viable product in the form of a website. And then, as I mentioned, we'll leave about 20-25 minutes for discussion. So, as I believe several of, or many of you already are aware, we started this journey back about a year and a half ago with the release of a concept paper. That concept paper was delivered at the 2018 AIRS conference. And the concept paper essentially outlined the vision, why we need the platform, what the platform essentially will do in terms of its capabilities and functionality, how we would engage with the 2-in-1s. And equally important, in that concept paper, we highlighted a number of key discussions that would need to take place in order to be successful with the platform. Things such as governance, onboarding of 2-in-1s, marketing, sort of some of the restrictions that would be put in place, so on and so forth. If you have not had an opportunity to read that concept paper, I believe United Way Worldwide has made that broadly available. If you are looking for that concept paper and cannot find it, I encourage you to contact United Way Worldwide through Josh, and he will provide you with that paper. But that really just outlines the vision and where we're trying to go with the product. We also communicated to vendors our intention to build out a national platform which would aggregate in a view-only form the data that comes out of multiple platforms such as iCarol, VisionLink, Refer, and WellSky, and a few other platforms as well. So we made that communication out, so our intentions were well known. And then we did hold a web conference shortly after the AIRS conference to invite other 2-in-1s to hear what was said at the AIRS conference. And that brings us to where we are at the current point, where we wanted to bring this to life after the release of the concept paper. We need to put something sort of in place to show the capabilities, and we've brought that to you in the form of a minimum viable product, which I'll describe in a little bit more detail in a moment. For those of you who may not be familiar with the overall goal of the National Data Platform, essentially we've tried to capture the intent or the final product in a single line here, and that is a single authoritative trusted source of community, social, and human service resource data. I've had the privilege of working with 2-in-1s across Canada and the United States for the better part of 10 years now, and I truly believe that 2-in-1 has the best data, and if we're able to roll that up from a local to a regional to a national level, we'll have such a fantastic product that everyone will be knocking on the door for this data. So I really do believe that, and with that, I believe we can also make the statement that we would have the best authoritative, trusted source of community, social, and human service resource data. So what does that mean, though? I think the points here that we'd like to emphasize in terms of a product is we really are working towards building a system that enables data to continue to be managed locally within your current platforms. We're not looking to replace any vendor's platforms. We're simply looking to aggregate the data out of those platforms and roll it up into a consistent view of 2-on-1 data at a national level. And then, of course, being able to provide that single point of access to 2-on-1 data, regardless of where that data is being sourced from, whether it be from the East Coast, West Coast, North, South, wherever, regardless, we want to be able to provide a single access point to that data through this national platform. We, of course, would take great care in ensuring that the data is structured and formatted in a consistent way so that regardless of where you're looking at data, whether it be for, again, the West, South, Northeast, doesn't matter, or Central, we would be able to provide a high quality view and a consistent view of 2-on-1 data regardless of source. We're also looking to put in place tools that would allow for third parties to work with the data through a set of what's called APIs, or an application programming interface, which is really nothing more than a set of doors into the national data store. And what this allows sort of to happen is we would see over the course of months or maybe a couple of years, we would see this ecosystem of great applications and sites and integrations to other systems such as hospital systems start to really leverage the data without a heavy lift by 2-on-1. Essentially, we make the data available and others create these wonderful products off of the 2-on-1 data. We're also envisaging a set of reporting features so United Ways, our partners and stakeholders, can take advantage of the great data that's in the platform. This is the resource data to start, but we also see a world in which we would be able to roll up the call report data, but we enable the reporting of that data as well. So we have a single source of truth in which to access the information. And the last couple of points here really speaks to the ability to, within the platform, to be able to mark up or enrich the resource data that comes in, whether we attach census data to it or create custom taxonomies that can overlay the AIRS taxonomy, for example, so that we can represent data in the context of the particular user of the data. So it might be, for example, a child care site, for example, in which we have a specific set of service taxonomies or a different taxonomy that we want to layer over the AIRS taxonomy. So we're really trying to think about how to deliver a great experience in terms of delivering good, high quality data for almost any scenario that you could imagine. So just to recap some of the key sort of thoughts or uses of the data when it's fully built is we would have custom resource directory capability built in. We'd have Google-like public searching. So think of Google, and then if that was just 2-on-1 out in front of sort of a Google-like app where you can type in anything and get back high quality results. Systems integration, pushing data out to whether it be hospital systems or external applications that can leverage the data. The APIs, of course, is a given where we make that data available through secure channels. Business intelligence to help people visualize what's actually in the platform. So using high quality charts and figures to be able to really navigate and search through the data. Mapping capabilities, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cognitive services, virtual assistants. The world is pretty much endless in terms of the opportunities once we consolidate the data within inside of a national platform. This slide sets out what we describe in the conceptual architecture paper. So again, this is a paper that that Expound Decision Systems authored. I authored with the support of many, many great people who really gave me their thoughts and contributions, and my role was essentially to frame it and put it together with inside of the form of here's the platform and here's its capabilities. So when we thought about sort of what this platform can do, we really wanted to simplify it into 4 buckets of capabilities, which we're looking at here. From left to right, the first major set of capabilities is collection. And this really is about the vendor products that are already out there, such as iCarol, Refer, and the other platforms being used to create that base record, if you will, that resource record. We are not looking in any way to recreate or substitute this product for those products. We're looking simply to connect to those existing platforms and pull that high quality data out of the platform, or rather out of their products and into the platform. So the collection is just a recognition that we have many vendor products out there, good products out there that we'd like to essentially tap into rather than replace. The second bucket is the extraction of the data from those systems, as I've explained, but then this is where the action really starts happening at the national level, is that we would start to stage that data and transform that data regardless of the structure and format. So each vendor has their own structure and format to the data. We're looking to essentially consolidate that into a single data structure and format. The format we're currently using for transformation is the Human Services Data Specification, which i.e. is the Open Referral Specification. We've made some modifications to that and intend to keep pushing that design so it works at a national level. Then, of course, the preparation is key, where we really want to ensure that the data is high quality. So we'll be looking to deduplicate the data, catalog it, which means recognizing the source of the data to ensure that there's a connection back to its local source, and attribution and recognition is always acknowledged within the platform. And then, as I've already spoken to, the enrichment of that data. So allowing for that data to sort of have different layers, if you will, on top that allow for linking, for example, shelter data to a particular census or zip code area that then would have its own demographic or rich data that can sort of put the 2-on-1 resource data within different contexts. And then storing of the data is really just ensuring a high security area in which we ensure that the data can only be accessed by those who are given authorization. And the last piece is really about bringing the data to life. This is how users experience the data. And there's several ways in which I've already spoken to it, so I won't go over this again, but essentially we're looking to create public search capabilities, push the data out through APIs, business intelligence reporting, so on and so forth. I also mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that there were several considerations and important things that need to be thought through, and these were documented inside of the concept paper. But just to give you a flavor of some of those important areas for consideration, that as we build out the platform, we have to keep in mind things such as the ownership and participation in the system. So who's accountable, how the investments will be made, how funding will be raised. The actual governance of the platform and management of the platform itself, the securities and access protocols that need to be in place in order to ensure that those who have access, but those who shouldn't have access don't. And then thinking through things such as how we market and position the platform for local, regional, and national use. All these things were discussed at least at a high level inside the concept paper, and I encourage you to review that. So where are we? So we see sort of 5 major stages in the sort of the development and launch of the national platform. We've gone through the visioning stage. We've gone through the design stage. We know what we want to build, and we started the initial build out with this minimum viable product, which I'll discuss in a second. But essentially, we're right in between that design and build stage right now. The steps that follow, of course, is the full out build. So we'll go through several cycles there and think about the different features that need to appear in each cycle. But when all cycles are complete, we implement the platform and then begin to manage it collectively. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit now. With that out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about the work that's been done over the last several months and was presented down in Atlanta at the 211 CEO conference. Expound was asked to build out a minimum viable product, which we decided would be in the form of a website that would essentially highlight how data could be searched for and how it would be presented regardless of the source of that data. A big piece of that work was to, first of all, ensure that we could bring data together across multiple 211s. So we had several 211s participate, but we also wanted to start to work across vendors as well. So we began with iCarol, then we jumped over to VisionLink, and we're right now, although you won't see it in the platform today, we're also working with the other vendors to integrate their data. So we set out then to build this minimum viable product, which you can see on screen. Really, we've just defined as just having enough features to show those early adopters. And I would say that those are the 211s who are interested in sort of following or participating in the early development of the platform. We wanted to just bring enough of that feature set to life so that you could see how this would look and feel. And of course, we at this point we're not really opening up any opportunity for feedback. We're not ready for that yet. It's just a capacity issue. But at some point, of course, we're going to be opening up the channels of communication for 211s to provide us with guidance as we move through kind of an agile approach to building out the platform. So that's what we have today. The scope of work, just very briefly, we worked with several 211s, which I'm going to flash up on screen in a moment, but our focus was on importing data from several 211s who were using iCarol and or VisionLink. So we wanted to really work with two vendor platforms to show that we could bring the data together from two different places and structure it in a consistent way. And then from there, we wanted to build out the application programming interface. So essentially, this was important because we're bringing the data together into a single place, but then we need to be able to access that data. So we created a set of APIs that would then be used to build out the website. And then on top of that, we built, and this is what will be demonstrated, is a website that allows for keyword searching. Nothing like, I wouldn't say technically very difficult to build, and probably not that surprising to anyone on the call today, but nevertheless, it certainly accomplishes a very important or takes that very important step in this journey, in that we're able to essentially integrate data from across 211s and present it in a similar way. The features, I'm going to skip over the features here. That we are recording this webinar, so for those who are interested in taking a look at sort of some of the capabilities that we built for the purposes of rolling out the minimum viable product or this website, you can take a look at what's printed here. But essentially what we're showing are the capabilities that were built into the MVP that you will see in a moment. I want to sort of recognize the very important contributions that were made by our 211s who participated in the MVP. So very grateful to these 211s for contributing their data into the platform. Each one of the 211s signed an agreement that essentially provided us with the data that we then used to create the MVP. And as you can see, we drew in data from 8 211s across the country. That was enough to really give us a sort of the scale and flavor of data that we were looking for. And the two vendors that we concentrated on amongst the 8 211s was iCarol and VisionLink. And we're currently working with Refer, and we'll be as well in the very near future working with Service Pointer, the WellSky team, to incorporate their data. A few screenshots here. I always provide some static screenshots in case anything goes badly wrong with a live demo. So here's what you are going to see. This is a screenshot of the landing page for the minimum viable product, which is essentially just a fairly straightforward keyword search window where you type in keywords such as help me find shelters within, and this is the distance from your target location, so 5, 10, 25 miles from whether it be a zip code or a city, a region. You type in any kind of geographic location, and then the search will be conducted around the radius within the miles that you specify for the resource types that you indicate through the keywords. We do have some browsing by topics as well. So for those of you that prefer to browse through information, we have some canned results for things such as healthcare, mental health, consumer services, so on and so forth at the bottom. I won't be demonstrating that capability today, but that sort of gives you a sense what the landing page looks like. We bring back then the results with a map and a set of listings that are displayed on the map, and then we have some filters down the left-hand side. And then for any one of those listings, you can click on the listing and get a detailed view of the resource that has been chosen, including things such as the service details, the location details, and a description of the organization, as well as a map, which you can see at the top of the screen here. So those are some static screenshots of the application. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kick over to a demo. Josh, maybe I can just hand it back to you for a second if you've seen anything in the chat window that I should be aware of or that you want to answer while I shift over to the demo here.
No, there's not anything in the chat area, but I just wanted to go back to one thing that Andrew said is that, and I kind of wanted to open with this as well, that we are really, because of our comprehensive, our network, and that we're in so many communities, there's nobody that has such a powerful tool as we do because of our hyper local boots on the ground work that each of our 2-on-1s and United Ways are doing. And because of that local presence, pulling it together into a national repository, wow, what a powerful tool that we're creating. So I think that's fantastic. One quick question before I turn it back to Andrew is, we had a question from Brianna about if Salesforce is on the vendor list for integration. They're currently not on the vendor list for integration yet. I know that's something that there's a couple 2-on-1s that are starting to use Salesforce more and more. So right now we've focused on the 4 major vendors, but definitely I think once we overcome the hurdles of getting 2 or 3 of these vendors all speaking the same language through APIs into the national platform, then I think it becomes easier and easier to integrate new ones after that. So it's long-term on the project list, but for this minimal viable project, we just started with minimal viable product, we just started with the 2 at first. So Andrew, back to you.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the landing page that I just showed to you in a static page, but this is actually the live website running at 201us.expound.ca. So this is just the landing area for the application. And before I demonstrate the system, what's important to note is, and this is sort of my opinion, but what we're looking at is essentially the tip of the iceberg, because what lies underneath the surface here is really that huge mass of infrastructure and processes and technology that integrates the data from multiple locations, multiple 2-on-1s, multiple vendors that bring it together and then expose it through that set of application programming interfaces or APIs that we connect to develop the site. So the site is really just that little piece of the iceberg that sits above the water. Of course, trying to demonstrate what's below the water level is probably not helpful, and B, would probably be so boring that we would lose probably the entire webinar audience. So I don't go into that, and we just show what's above the water line. For those of you more interested in what's underneath the water line, I can certainly set up a demonstration or a webinar in the future to highlight that for those who are more technically inclined. Okay, so let's get going here. So we've got a landing page that allows for basically a Google-like type of search. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take a quick tour around the country here, and we're going to look for shelter services. within 10 miles of a number of locations. Let's start in Raleigh, North Carolina. That came up first. And what we're looking for then is all results for shelter within 10 miles of the Raleigh location. We can see here, actually, we returned 41 results. We showed 10 results per page. And you can see each of the listings that were contributed by 211 North Carolina. So we attribute the resource data. So when it comes in from its source, we know what that source is, and then we recognize that source right in the listing. And we can see here that with each of the shelter listings, we have several categories that can be used to further filter the data. So we highlight those categories. At the highest level, the AIRS category basic needs is stamped onto the record. And in this particular case, we had a level 2 of homeless shelter. So what we're trying to do is build into the results several facets or topics and subtopics that you can use to further filter down. And so I won't do this at the moment, but if we were to click any one of these categories, subcategories, or even the service areas, in this case, counties in North Carolina, you could actually filter the data further. So you can imagine if you did a wider search and within 25 miles and you returned 125 results within inside of that area, then you'd probably want to, similar to shopping sites, you'd start to want to filter down on things like whether in the case of like say Amazon, you're filtering down on brand name or size of product. So the 2-on-1 sort of analogy is to work through categories, service types, and service areas. So this is how we provide some functionality to the user. On the left-hand side, we provide similar categories, but we identify the total number of results matching each of the categories, service types, and service areas, each which you can click on to further filter the data. But let's do our tour around the country here for a moment. So now recognizing all the different 211s that have contributed their data to the national platform so far, we're going to take a look at Baltimore for shelters. And now we're looking at all shelters being returned within 10 miles of the center of Baltimore. There's 64 in this case, and you can see that this data was contributed by 201 Maryland. Now, if we take a look at some other areas, let's go over to the other side of the country here. We'll go to Ventura, California. Again, we can see within 10 miles, we have several records returned. We can then go, I believe it is a little bit north into Oakland. And now we're looking at shelters in Oakland. Let's go a little bit farther north into Des Moines, into Omaha. Just wanting to recognize each of the contributors here. Hartford, New Orleans, and Green Bay. I hope I have not missed anyone. If I have, my apologies. But here what we've done is essentially a query on the national platform, and this data has come from multiple 211s and multiple vendors, and you can see that we're essentially providing the same experience. We need to work a little bit on the font and presentation of the data, but for the most part, we're providing a very consistent view at a national level of data at a local or regional level. And that was one of the big pieces or objectives to the platform. We can drive in this case, where we were in Green Bay. I'm going to just flip back to, so I know what the results should look like. I'm going to go back into Raleigh. And we'll go ahead and we'll get the details from 201 North Carolina, this particular resource. I'm not sure what this will show, but we want to look at this particular service listing. So now we're going back into the platform and we're pulling back the details for AME night shelter. And when those details come up, you'll see, as I showed in the static screenshot, the information on such things as eligibility, the service hours, so on and so forth within the actual data. Looks like we're hanging here a little bit, so I'll stop that. Let's go in here and see shelter for families. So we bring back simply the listing. So we can put as much or as little data in here as possible. Some listings have a lot of data, some have less, some have more. So you get a sense of what comes back here. If we wanted to start a new search, we're just brought back to the home page. So this is kind of really, again, the minimum viable product was not meant to be the final product. There would be lots of improvements in terms of the responsiveness of the design, the look and feel, fonts, all of that kind of stuff. They're really what we wanted to set out to do was to bring sort of to life the national data platform in the context of a searchable resource directory at the national level. So with that, I'm going to just briefly click back to let me jump over here to the presentation view. I want to just talk very briefly about another project that Expound is involved with 211 North Carolina and Unitas. And the reason that I'd like to present this is that really the value in a national platform is not so much what I've shown already, the website or whether it be business intelligence. Those are all important layers, but the most important layer is actually making data available, whether it be for 211s collectively to build that national website, or whether it be for building intelligence or artificial intelligence, machine, whatever the service is that you want to layer on top of. All those services are dependent on a high quality middle layer called the application programming interface. And what that is at the end of the day is, with all this data aggregated into a national platform, think of it, I guess, as a database. It's more than that, but if we think about it as a database, we want to expose that data in a secure way. So we want 211s to have the ability to provide keys to their funders, to their stakeholders, to others who are willing and interested in paying for the data. We need to be able to provide that data back to them so they can build their own products and services. We've done something very similar to that in what's called the NC Care 360 initiative in North Carolina. So the reason I want to show this is that this is very close to what we envisage for at a national level, in which there would be a developer platform that would expose the 211 data in a secure way through a set of keys, if you will, that developers could use to pull data out, and that data would be scoped to whether it be your particular 211 or a particular geography or a particular context like shelter or housing, but be able to provide that data in a secure way and be able to monitor the use of that information. So we've built out that platform already in North Carolina through the NC Care 360 initiative in partnership with Unitas and 211 North Carolina, 211 United Way. And the screen you're looking at right now is that landing page. So essentially, this is just a place for developers. They can go sign up for a key, and then they get access to the data that they're provided access to. And then from there, there's really three, and this is probably, again, very similar to what we would expose at a national level, is there are three ways or three sets of data, if you will, that can be extracted. There's an export, which is a very powerful API, which allows for you to provide to those that you want to provide access to your entire data set. That's an export. So that allows for the data essentially to flow out in its totality to those who you want to have that data. That's pretty powerful and probably not going to be used that often, but it's very powerful and useful if you're interested in that. The resources is essentially the open referral implementation of the API for the national data, and essentially allows for querying of all of the data in the platform and the resource data, of course. And then there's the search capabilities, which in fact you kind of just saw that through the website, where we have a whole bunch of logic that's already built into the API that allow developers to search the repository based on keyword and bring back important information such as latitude and longitude that allow for plotting on maps. And then the last piece of the trial I won't get into. But essentially what I want to just bring to life here is that this API level layer is the really important layer that needs to be built and leveraged by 2-on-1s across the country, because this is how we see providing the data that's rolled up at a national level back to you, and you're in full control of who has access to that data. So that's just a little bit about the implementation of an API developer portal in the context of the NC Care 360 initiative. With that, thank you very much for hanging in there. And I know everyone's been on mute, so I think what I'll do to start with is I'm going to hand it over to Josh. I see a number of questions have come in, so I think we can start the conversation out with Josh moderating, and I can answer any questions that I'm drawn into. And I can also bring people off of mute as well. But I'm going to encourage you to use the chat window for the moment. If we need to bring people off of mute, we can do that as well. Over to you, Josh.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. Again, I hope you can capture my enthusiasm of how cool this is going to be and how fantastic it is to see it shaping up. This is a big step in the movement of becoming a really strong unified network and creating and finally showcasing some of the value that we have on a local level, but amplifying it on this national level. So I wanted to just recap really quickly a couple of questions that have come in, and also ask Andrew to chime in on a little bit of them as well. We had a question about how often would the data be refreshed in the MVP as well as the final product, the National Data Platform product. And for the MVP, we are not refreshing the data. It's for demonstration use only. It was just kind of a one-time grab the data for demonstration and show it off. For the final product, ideally we will have the information shared in real time via an API. So it's refreshed in real time or consistently. If an API is not available, then we'd have to set up a sort of routine or regular upload that in some cases could be automated, but that's kind of something to consider that wouldn't be as ideal if we didn't have the API. I'm going to let Andrew chime in to that question, and then if there's anything he wants to add, but also another question. So Andrew, did you want to add anything on that before I jump to the next one?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Josh. The refresh of the data within the repository, in some cases, is dependent on the vendor. Each vendor provides different ways in which to access your data. And just using iCarol as an example, you can have basically real-time access to the data from iCarol if you set up what they call replication. That is not a cheap implementation, so there are costs involved in there. Now, and the other side of the spectrum for iCarol is to export the data out of your, essentially your database, and import it into the platform. And that can be done for free on a monthly basis, and you can also subscribe on a weekly basis for the export to occur. So there's different ranges in which we can keep the data refreshed. Ultimately, I mean, what we would strive towards is that, and this may not be in the short term, but in the longer term, we would want to have near real-time replication of the data from each of the vendor systems into the national platform, especially in cases where we're trying to respond leveraging the capacity of the 2-on-1 network to things such as disasters. So that's the ultimate goal. What I can say is that I think to create at a national level a high quality product that others would be interested in purchasing data through the APIs or leveraging the data, a monthly refresh would probably be sufficient in most cases, and that's something we can certainly accommodate almost immediately.
Great, thank you. Another question came in from Kathy, talking about the different style guides that we all have, and which makes us cool and unique and independent and diverse, and how do we pull all that together? And then especially when groups like, or the different vendors like iCarol and Refernet maybe display agency records differently. One of my quick responses to Kathy is that yes, we do need some national style guides, and ideally And in some cases, the platform will be able to clean up that and create some standardization of formats and pulling that together. But we will also need some national style guides. But Andrew, I really wanted your input on that, is to explain kind of how we're working with how different vendors display records, and even though we're all using the same taxonomy, there's different nuances. How is the platform going to manage that or interact with it?
That's a great question, because this really comes down to two steps. The first step is the structure of data. So it's the content, if you will, of the 211 record, and that content is collected a little bit differently across vendors. We're able to solve that problem on your behalf for the most part, and where that or how that problem is solved is we use the Human Services Data Specification, which is essentially the structure of the data. And what that means is that each of the vendors, when we import their data, we're able to map their data into that Human Services Data Specification. So we've got some guidance there in how to kind of bring that data in, so there's no gaps essentially in your data. The formatting question, now that's the devil's kind of in the details there, but the formatting of that data, some of that we can handle. So we can make the data look similar, all the type and all that kind of the type, font family, all that kind of stuff, the look of it. But when it comes down to differences in implementation of taxonomy, for example, there's some work to be done there. So where we're at is we can do the heavy lift on the structure of the data so that the content is kind of consistent across the country. In terms of the formatting, depending on how each of the 211s has decided to sort of maybe go off on their own and do something a little bit differently, we'd have to work probably as a nation somehow and figure out how to bring some more consistency to that. So when we start or launch the first implementation of the national platform, for example, it might look a little bit different across 211s, but hopefully not different enough that people don't really feel that it's got that consistent look and feel to it. And over time, we'll just improve it through, as Josh, you've already mentioned, kind of working together to come up with a national sort of format to the data as well.
Great, thank you. And I think that might have addressed Kathy's, another component to Kathy's question about using, even though we have statewide databases, similar services are not always indexed with the same term. And so how would we, make sure there's, standardized templates for WIC, area agencies on aging, adult services, maybe disaster resources, that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
So part of that is that style guide. And what were you going to say, Andrew?
This is great. Thanks for the opportunity to actually say something that I haven't said yet. And it's in terms of the value of how we've implemented search. A lot of platforms will essentially query or filter data, which means that you have to have the data already in which to filter. So in a website context, that would be you click on a drop-down box, you click something, and it goes back to the database and grabs just that data. We have actually implemented a different, and I think a much better set of technologies. It's true search technology, very similar to Google. Google is magical, right? We'll never be able to get to that level. No one can. They're just the best at it. But you type in a keyword, and you're actually not doing any filtering or querying. What it's doing is it's looking across all of the different 211 records for, in this case, I demonstrated shelters. It's looking for shelter in different areas of the program record. It could be in the title, it could be in the taxonomy, it could be in the description. But the important point is that we actually have we have a bit of logic that goes in and not only finds those records with shelter in it, but it also can create a bit of an algorithm or ranking of the records that help the best records get to the top. Maybe the context is geography or something else. Why this is important is because this helps get around, to some degree, the issue of 211s implementing taxonomy differently, because we'll never solve that issue. There's different ways to implement the taxonomy, no right way, no right, wrong way. but we've implemented this search technology that would allow for taxonomy to be used as a kind of a filter after we bring back to you the search results. So again, using the Amazon analogy, when you search for, let's say, televisions on Amazon, you get back this huge listing of products. But what they provide to you on usually the left side of the website is the ability to navigate through certain filters, whether it be brand or size, those kinds of things. We envisage using the taxonomy not just for the search, but also for that filtering. But that's important because I think this really helps us get around what could be a very large obstacle in the taxonomy being implemented differently across 211s if we didn't use this kind of technology.
Cool, thank you. Awesome, thank you. And hope we answered all your questions today, Kathy. And again, if somebody has a question, feel free to enter it in the chat bot or the chat box, and then and we'll also open it up to telephone in case you're not on the chat. One other question here from Deborah, and she asks about the value of the 211 data, and I keep talking about how valuable it is and how wonderful it is. And if we expect United Ways to provide funding to agencies directly for the use of this data or providing this data to stakeholders. And this presents a really big question, and my short, quick answer is I don't know the answer to that yet. That's something we're still working on, is the monetization and governance of the data. This is still a big piece, and Andrew talked about this, that there's some governance issues that still need to be worked out, and there's some people and thought leaders that have come together and are tackling some of this. We're also looking at seeing if we can get a consultant to help us on how do you monetize data in today's age when data is essentially free on the internet, and how do you find value in it, and is it something that United Way is going to fund? Since every United Way is independently funded and operated by a local board of directors and a local staff and a local volunteers that do the grant process, it could vary from community to community. So it's really hard to pinpoint and give you a strong answer because, one, we haven't identified it. Two, there are a lot of variables that we still need to identify. However, having said all that and kind of setting it up, I think that this opportunity of having a national repository creates a product for us that we haven't really harnessed the value of historically. I think we all recognize that it's a valuable product and a valuable resource, our data, but we've struggled for years to say, okay, what does this product mean? How do we pull it off the shelf and sell it to another stakeholder or another agency or a funder? And in some communities, we're doing an okay job at it. Some communities are further along than others. But I think we're still a couple steps behind of really creating that product that makes it easy to fund and provide funding for. And another thing I'm reminded of in trying to create the funding for it, because yes, I do see United Way saying, oh yeah, there's some value in this. It's not so much the data that is the most valuable, but how we share the data, how we package it with our phone number. Nobody else, all those other databases that are popping up out there, and you hear and see of them all the time. We've all been there, and somebody comes to our office and says, oh, I have this idea, I want to create a directory of all the community programs, or I want to create a database or a website. I have this new idea of a website of all these new, put all the nonprofits in there so people just have one stop. We hear those pitches all the time. And but one of the greatest values that we have is it's not just the database, it's not just a phone number, it's this whole package together. You add it with our needs data and our problem needs statements. That's the package that we provide, or the product that we provide, that is a lot easier to sell and add so much more value. So those are some questions. That was a lot of thought around what your question is, Deborah, and it wasn't a solid answer, but I hope that it kind of gives us, puts us in the right direction. So, and then your next question about governance and who's talking about this and how can your organization get involved directly. please send me an email, and I'm going to post my email right here if you would like to get involved. There are a couple groups. There is the 211 US Steering Committee. There is the 211 CEO Partnership group that have started some of these conversations already. We had a couple of the breakout sessions at the Atlanta 211 Leadership Summit, where we actually broke out into 3 or 4 different rooms, and everybody involved could kind of pick their room and go and have some of these conversations about funding and integration and governance, and what's the next step. So there's a lot of people that have started these conversations, and I'm trying to I keep hearing from people that want to get involved. So please reach out to me if you want to get involved specifically in one of these areas, and we can continue to have these conversations. One thing that Andrew brought up in the kind of the flow chart, where that gold star was, is last year we did a lot of design work and concept work, and now we're kind of in this planning and building phase, and we're moving things along that gold star, but there's still a lot to go, and we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, because we don't have funding on the to fund this entire project or maintain it long term. So we still need to have some of these conversations before we balance all of the other activities, as far as governance and rolling it out and implementing and bringing on more groups at the same time. So Deborah, loved your questions. Thank you so much for asking them, and it really offers an opportunity to get more involved. We only have a couple more minutes, so I invite you to, if you've got an extra chat, please do so. I'm going to open it up right now. I think we've unmuted, or we're going to unmute everybody. Andrew, if you want to offer that, so we can open it up.
Dorian called at 3 o'clock today.
Any last questions? So.
Yeah, everyone's unmuted, Josh.
All right.
Free for all.
I just wanted to give some of the callers on the line who didn't get a chance to chat, if they have a question, please do so now. Otherwise, we might put everybody back on mute. So
I'm not hearing anything, Josh, so I'm going to put everyone back on mute, and maybe we could just have some closing comments. And as I mentioned, we've recorded and we'll post out the video by end of day.
Great. I appreciate your.
I'm treasurer of State VOAD.
Oh, sorry, Josh. Let me. I just have to put everyone back on mute, and then I'll take you off mute. 1 second.
All right.
Okay, go ahead, Josh.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for your participation today. Again, if you have some questions, I left my email there, and feel free to reach out to me directly. We're happy to share this webinar, the concept paper, any other frequently asked questions, and address people's individual questions as they come up. If you'd like to get more involved, please reach out as well. Again, special thanks to Andrew, and appreciate everybody's time today.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, everyone.